Welcome, restless souls, to a gentle journey through the darker corridors of South Park's animated landscape. Tonight, we explore the profound tapestry of mortality that weaves through this mountain town's chaotic existence. From Kenny's endless cycle to the countless souls who have passed through these snowy streets, death in South Park serves as both comedy and contemplation, revealing deeper truths about life, loss, and the human condition. So settle beneath your covers, close your eyes like drifting into eternal sleep, and let us walk together through the surprisingly complex realm where cartoon mortality meets genuine philosophical inquiry. Rest easy, and let us begin. In the fascinating intersection of animated storytelling and existential contemplation, few creative works have approached the concept of mortality with as much complexity and philosophical depth as the seemingly simple cartoon universe of South Park, Colorado. The show's treatment of death transcends the traditional boundaries of animated comedy to encompass profound questions about the nature of existence, the meaning of loss, and the ways that communities process grief and trauma through both humor and genuine emotional engagement. This unique approach to mortality within an animated framework creates a space where audiences can explore difficult themes about death and dying through the protective distance that cartoon representation provides, allowing for both comedic relief and serious contemplation within the same narrative structure. The philosophical foundations that underlie South Park's approach to death reveal a sophisticated understanding of how humor can serve as both a coping mechanism for processing difficult emotions and a vehicle for exploring taboo subjects that might otherwise be too challenging or threatening for direct examination. The show's creators demonstrate an intuitive grasp of the psychological principle that laughter often emerges from anxiety and fear, particularly around subjects like mortality that touch on fundamental human vulnerabilities and uncertainties. By placing death within the context of animated comedy, the series creates a safe space where viewers can confront their own anxieties about mortality while maintaining enough emotional distance to process these feelings without becoming overwhelmed by their intensity. The recurring nature of death and resurrection within the South Park universe operates on multiple levels simultaneously, serving both immediate comedic purposes and deeper mythological functions that speak to universal human desires for continuity and meaning in the face of life's ultimate uncertainty. The most obvious example of this pattern appears in Kenny McCormick's endless cycle of death and rebirth, but the phenomenon extends throughout the series to encompass various forms of temporary mortality, near-death experiences, and supernatural resurrections that suggest a universe where the boundary between life and death remains permeable and subject to narrative necessity rather than realistic biological constraints. This flexible approach to mortality within the animated medium allows the show's creators to explore death from multiple perspectives without being constrained by the realistic consequences that would necessarily follow such events in naif, live-action storytelling. The cartoon format provides a kind of philosophical laboratory where different approaches to death, dying, and grief can be examined and tested without the weight of genuine human suffering that would make such experimentation ethically problematic in other narrative contexts. This freedom enables the series to address serious questions about mortality while maintaining the lightness and accessibility that make these explorations palatable to audiences who might otherwise avoid such heavy subject matter. The cultural and social commentary that emerges through the show's treatment of mortality reflects broader contemporary anxieties about death in modern American society, including the medicalization of dying, the commercialization of grief, and the ways that media representations of death shape public understanding of mortality and loss. Episodes that feature death often serve as vehicles for critiquing social institutions and cultural practices related to dying, revealing how animated storytelling can provide powerful platforms for social criticism that might be more difficult to achieve through direct political commentary or documentary approaches. The balance between humor and genuine emotional weight that characterizes the show's death-related storylines demonstrates the creator's sophisticated understanding of how comedy and tragedy can coexist and enhance each other, rather than simply cancelling out or diminishing each other's impact. The most effective death-related episodes achieve a complex emotional register where laughter and sadness, absurdity and profundity, cynicism and genuine feeling can all exist within the same narrative space without creating cognitive dissonance or emotional confusion for viewers. Death as a narrative device for character development appears throughout the series in various forms, from the immediate shock and grief that follow unexpected losses to the long-term psychological and social changes that result from characters' encounters with mortality. These death-related character arcs often provide opportunities for exploring aspects of personality and relationship that might not emerge under normal circumstances, revealing hidden depths and unexpected resilience in characters who might otherwise appear one-dimensional or purely comedic in their function within the show's ensemble cast. The show's approach to taboo subjects through the animated medium reflects a broader tradition in animation of using cartoon representation to address topics that would be considered inappropriate or too sensitive for direct treatment. In other media formats, the protective distance created by animated characters and settings allows for exploration of death, violence, and grief in ways that can be both more extreme and more gentle than would be possible with live actors, creating unique opportunities for both shock value and emotional subtlety that serve different narrative purposes across different episodes and story arcs. The evolution of how death is treated throughout the series reflects both changes in the creator's artistic vision and broader cultural shifts in how American society approaches mortality and grief. Early episodes often treated death primarily as a source of shock, humor, or narrative convenience, while later seasons increasingly explore the emotional and psychological dimensions of loss, suggesting a maturing perspective on mortality that parallels the show's overall development from pure comedy toward more complex social and cultural commentary. The mythological dimensions of death in South Park extend beyond individual character deaths to encompass broader questions about the nature of existence, the possibility of afterlife, and the meaning that can be extracted from mortality within both religious and secular frameworks. Episodes that feature supernatural or metaphysical elements related to death often explore these larger philosophical questions, while maintaining the show's characteristic irreverence and skepticism toward institutional authority and conventional wisdom. The psychological realism that underlies even the most absurd death-related storylines reflects the creator's understanding of how real people actually process grief, trauma, and loss, even when these psychological processes are filtered through exaggerated cartoon characters and fantastic narrative circumstances. The accuracy of these psychological portrayals contributes to the show's ability to generate genuine emotional responses from audiences, despite its obviously artificial and comedic surface presentation. The community dimensions of death in South Park reveal how mortality functions not just as an individual experience, but as a social phenomenon that affects entire networks of relationships and social structures. Episodes that explore the aftermath of significant deaths often examine how communities come together or fall apart in response to loss, revealing both the supportive potential and the destructive capacity of group responses to tragedy and grief. The educational aspects of the show's death-related content operate through both direct moral instruction and subtler forms of social modeling, teaching audiences about appropriate and inappropriate responses to mortality while simultaneously critiquing conventional approaches to death, dying, and grief. These educational elements often work through negative example, showing characters making poor choices in response to death and allowing viewers to learn from these mistakes without having to experience the consequences directly. The therapeutic potential of engaging with death through animated comedy reflects broader psychological principles about the healing power of humor and the importance of finding safe spaces to explore difficult emotions and existential questions. For many viewers, South Park's treatment of mortality may provide their first opportunity to think seriously about death and dying within a context that feels manageable and non-threatening, creating a foundation for more mature engagement with these inevitable aspects of human experience. The artistic achievement, represented by the show's sophisticated approach to mortality within a comedic animated format, demonstrates the potential for popular entertainment to serve serious philosophical and educational functions, without sacrificing accessibility or entertainment value. This integration of profound themes with accessible presentation suggests possibilities for how other creative works might address difficult subjects while reaching broad audiences who might not otherwise engage with such challenging material. The legacy implications of South Park's innovative approach to animated mortality extend beyond immediate entertainment value to encompass broader cultural influence on how death and dying are discussed, understood, and represented in contemporary American media. The show's willingness to treat cartoon death as a serious subject worthy of philosophical consideration has opened space for other creators to explore similar themes while contributing to broader cultural conversations about mortality, grief, and the search for meaning in the face of life's ultimate limitations and uncertainties. In the gentle recognition of animation's unique capacity to make the unbearable bearable, we discover that South Park's approach to death offers not just entertainment but genuine wisdom about how communities and individuals can navigate the inevitable reality of mortality while maintaining hope, humor, and human connection in the face of life's most profound challenges and uncertainties. In the profound mythology of animated mortality, few characters embody the existential paradox of death and renewal as completely as Kenneth McCormick, whose endless cycle of dying and returning has become one of the most philosophically complex narratives in contemporary television. His relationship with death transcends simple comedic device to encompass deeper questions about consciousness, identity, and the nature of existence itself, creating a character whose very essence challenges conventional understanding of what it means to be alive, to die, and to persist through repeated encounters with mortality that would destroy any ordinary individual's sense of self and continuity. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Kenny's recurring deaths operate on multiple levels of narrative complexity, beginning with the most obvious comedic function of shocking audiences with increasingly elaborate and unexpected demises, but extending far beyond surface entertainment to encompass profound questions about fate, free will, and the forces that govern individual destiny within both fictional and real-world contexts. Each death represents not merely a temporary setback or narrative convenience, but a genuine encounter with the ultimate boundary of human experience, processed through a consciousness that has developed unique perspectives on mortality through repeated direct experience with dying. The earliest manifestations of Kenny's death cycle in the show's initial seasons established patterns and themes that would evolve and deepen throughout the series, beginning with relatively simple shock deaths that served primarily comedic purposes, but gradually developing into more complex explorations of how repeated encounters with mortality might affect an individual's psychological development and worldview. The famous phrase, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," became not just a catchphrase, but a ritualistic acknowledgement of death that transformed individual tragedy into communal experience, creating shared responses to loss that paradoxically diminished its emotional impact through repetition, while simultaneously highlighting the casual way that communities often process individual suffering. The progression of Kenny's deaths throughout the series reveals an increasingly sophisticated approach to mortality that incorporates elements of classical mythology, religious symbolism, and contemporary psychological understanding of trauma and resilience. His deaths evolved from simple physical destruction to encompass more complex forms of existential dissolution, including transformations, disappearances, and metaphysical dissolutions that challenge basic assumptions about the relationship between body, mind, and identity. The psychological impact of witnessing Kenny's repeated deaths on his friends and community provides crucial insight into how individuals and groups develop coping mechanisms for processing loss and trauma, particularly when that loss occurs within patterns that defy normal expectations about the permanence and finality of death. Stan, Kyle, and Cartman's evolving responses to Kenny's demise reveal different approaches to grief, denial, acceptance, and the gradual emotional numbing that can result from repeated exposure to traumatic loss. Stan Marsh's typical response to Kenny's deaths reflects the psychology of someone who maintains emotional availability and genuine concern despite repeated exposure to loss, demonstrating a form of resilience that allows for continued empathy and emotional investment, even when rational analysis might suggest that such investment is pointless, given the temporary nature of Kenny's mortality. His consistent expressions of shock and concern suggest a character who refuses to become completely desensitized to death, despite overwhelming evidence that such sensitization serves no protective or practical purpose. Kyle Broflovsky's intellectual approach to processing Kenny's deaths reveals a mind that seeks logical explanations and coherent frameworks for understanding experiences that fundamentally challenge rational analysis and coherent, conventional understanding of mortality. His attempts to make sense of the death cycle often lead him into philosophical territory that explores questions about consciousness, identity, and the nature of existence that most children his age would never be forced to consider. Eric Cartman's characteristically self-centered response to Kenny's deaths demonstrates how certain personality types can use even tragic circumstances as opportunities for personal advantage or emotional manipulation, revealing the way that individual character traits shape responses to universal experiences like loss and grief. His ability to exploit Kenny's temporary absence for his own purposes while showing minimal genuine concern for his friend's suffering illustrates how empathy deficits can manifest even in the face of repeated encounters with, quote, mortality. The revelation of Kenny's superhero identity as Mysterion represents perhaps the most significant development in understanding his relationship with death, providing both explanation and deeper mystery about the forces that govern his unusual relationship with mortality. The Mysterion persona allows Kenny to transform his experience of repeated death from victimization into agency, using his unique perspective on mortality as a tool for protecting others and fighting injustice within his community. Kenny's own awareness of his mortality cycle creates one of the most psychologically complex character studies in animated television, exploring how an individual consciousness might adapt to and integrate repeated experiences of dying without losing essential aspects of identity and personality. His growing understanding of his unique situation transforms him from passive victim of circumstance into active participant in cycles of death and renewal that serve purposes beyond his individual experience. The cosmic or supernatural forces that enable Kenny's resurrections remain deliberately mysterious throughout much of the series, creating space for various interpretations about whether his condition results from divine intervention, scientific anomaly, mystical curse, or some combination of factors that transcend normal categories of explanation. This ambiguity allows the character to function simultaneously as comedy, tragedy, and metaphysical exploration without being constrained by any single interpretive framework. The evolution of how Kenny's deaths are presented to audiences reveals changing approaches to comedy, mortality, and the relationship between entertainment and genuine emotional engagement. Early deaths often functioned primarily as shock humor, while later iterations incorporate more complex emotional and psychological dimensions that acknowledge the genuine tragedy underlying even comedic presentations of mortality. The specific mechanisms through which Kenny dies demonstrate remarkable creativity in exploring different forms of mortality, from simple physical destruction to complex metaphysical dissolutions that challenge basic assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and physical existence. These varied death scenarios serve both comedic and philosophical purposes, illustrating different ways that life can end, while exploring broader questions about what constitutes genuine death versus temporary discontinuation of embodied existence. The community's gradually increasing awareness of Kenny's unusual relationship with death creates opportunities for exploring how social groups adapt to and integrate experiences that challenge conventional understanding of reality and normal social expectations. The slow recognition that Kenny's deaths and returns follow patterns that transcend normal mortality creates space for examining how communities process information that conflicts with established worldviews and social assumptions. The religious and spiritual dimensions of Kenny's death cycle incorporate elements from various traditions and belief systems, creating a syncretic mythology that draws on Christian concepts of resurrection, Hindu and Buddhist ideas about reincarnation, and contemporary New Age spirituality, while remaining skeptical of institutional religious authority and conventional theological explanations for supernatural phenomena. The scientific attempts to understand Kenny's condition reflect contemporary cultural tensions between materialist and spiritual explanations for phenomena that challenge conventional understanding of natural laws and physical limitations. Episodes that explore scientific approaches to Kenny's situation often reveal both the power and limitations of empirical investigation when applied to experiences that may transcend normal categories of physical reality. The ethical implications of Kenny's immortality create complex moral landscapes where questions about the value of individual life, the meaning of suffering, and the responsibility of communities to protect vulnerable members become complicated by his apparent immunity to permanent harm. His unique situation challenges normal assumptions about risk, safety, and the measures that societies should take to protect individuals from dangerous circumstances. The psychological development that results from repeated encounters with mortality provides Kenny with perspectives on existence, meaning, and human nature that would be impossible for individuals who have not experienced death directly. His growing wisdom and mature understanding of life's complexities reflect the kind of character development that can only result from extraordinary experiences that force accelerated psychological growth and philosophical sophistication. The impact of Kenny's deaths on broader South Park mythology extends beyond his individual character development to encompass questions about the nature of reality within the show's universe and the forces that govern existence. within fictional worlds that operate according to different rules than ordinary physical reality. His condition suggests that the South Park universe itself possesses characteristics that transcend normal expectations about mortality, causality, and the permanence of physical existence. The therapeutic potential of Kenny's story for audiences who struggle with their own mortality, anxieties, provides opportunities for processing fears about death and dying through identification with a character who has survived repeated encounters with mortality while maintaining essential aspects of personality and identity. His resilience in the face of ultimate adversity offers models for how individuals might approach their own mortality fears with courage and philosophical sophistication. The friendship dynamics that persist despite Kenny's unusual relationship with death demonstrate the power of genuine human connection to transcend even the most extraordinary circumstances and maintain continuity of care and affection across repeated cycles of loss and reunion. His friends' continued loyalty and concern reveal the depth of emotional bonds that can persist even when normal expectations about permanence and continuity are repeatedly violated. The larger questions about consciousness and identity that emerge from Kenny's story touch on fundamental philosophical problems that have puzzled thinkers throughout human history, including questions about personal identity across time, the relationship between mind and body, and the possibility of consciousness surviving physical death. His experience provides a unique lens for exploring these abstract philosophical problems through concrete narrative examples that make complex ideas accessible to broad audiences. The transformation of Kenny's relationship with death from passive victimization to active agency demonstrates possibilities for how individuals can reframe traumatic experiences into sources of strength and purpose, using even the most challenging circumstances as opportunities for growth, service, and meaningful contribution to their communities and relationships. In the gentle contemplation of Kenny's endless journey through death and renewal, we discover profound truths about resilience, identity, and the mysterious forces that govern existence itself, finding in his story both comfort for our own mortality, anxieties, and inspiration for approaching life's ultimate challenges with courage, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to the relationships and purposes that give meaning to our temporary existence in this uncertain world. In the complex landscape of animated mortality, where death serves multiple narrative functions beyond simple character elimination, the phenomenon of temporary death and resurrection occupies a particularly fascinating space that challenges conventional understanding of life's permanence, while exploring deeper themes about identity, transformation, and the resilience of human consciousness in the face of ultimate adversity. These experiences of dying and returning create unique opportunities for character development and philosophical exploration that would be impossible within the constraints of realistic mortality, allowing creators to examine what lies beyond the threshold of death, while maintaining the continuity necessary for ongoing narrative development. The concept of temporary death within the South Park universe operates according to different rules than Kenny's cyclical mortality, encompassing experiences where characters encounter genuine death or near-death states before returning through various mechanisms that range from medical intervention to supernatural resurrection to simple narrative convenience. These experiences differ from Kenny's pattern in that they typically occur as isolated incidents rather than recurring cycles, and they often result in lasting psychological or physical changes that acknowledge the profound impact of crossing the boundary between life and death. Chef Jerome McElroy's transformation and ultimate fate represents one of the most complex and emotionally challenging examples of temporary death leading to permanent transformation within the series. demonstrating how encounters with mortality can fundamentally alter individual identity and social relationships in ways that make return to previous states of being impossible, even when biological life continues. His initial departure from the community, through what appears to be voluntary exile, becomes complicated by supernatural influences that transform him from beloved community member into dangerous adversary, illustrating how death and resurrection can serve as vehicles for exploring themes of corruption, loss of innocence, and the tragic consequences of ideological manipulation. The psychological and social dynamics surrounding Chef's transformation reveal how communities process the loss of individuals who remain physically present but have become fundamentally different in ways that make meaningful relationship impossible. His changed personality and dangerous behavior create a form of living death that may be more traumatic for his friends and neighbors than simple physical mortality would have been, forcing them to grieve the loss of someone who continues to exist in transformed and threatening form. The ultimate resolution of Chef's storyline through his apparent final death provides both closure and additional trauma for the community that had already processed his initial loss, demonstrating how complicated grief can become when initial loss is followed by false hope of return, subsequent disappointment, and final confirmation that the original relationship cannot be restored. The children's response to these repeated losses reveals different approaches to processing complex grief that involves multiple stages of hope, disappointment, and acceptance. Stan Marsh's various encounters with temporary death and near-death experiences throughout the series provide insight into how repeated proximity to mortality affects individual psychology and worldview development, particularly for characters whose natural empathy and emotional sensitivity make them more vulnerable to the psychological impact of confronting life's ultimate boundaries. His experiences with clinical death, supernatural transportation, and metaphysical dissolution create a cumulative understanding of mortality that shapes his approach to risk, relationship, and meaning-making throughout his development. The specific circumstances that lead to Stan's temporary deaths often reflect broader themes about the dangers of contemporary life, including medical intervention, environmental hazards, and social violence that create mortality risks for children who should be protected from such extreme experiences. His survival of these encounters demonstrates remarkable resilience, while also revealing the psychological costs of repeated trauma exposure that may not become fully apparent until years later, when the accumulated impact of these experiences manifests in adult, behavioral, and emotional patterns. Stan's near-death experiences frequently involve encounters with supernatural or metaphysical realms that provide him with perspectives on existence and meaning that would be impossible to achieve through normal lived experience, creating a character whose understanding of life's purpose and value has been shaped by direct contact with whatever lies beyond ordinary consciousness. These experiences often result in temporary wisdom and maturity that gradually fades as the immediate impact of the near-death encounter diminishes, suggesting that insights gained through extreme states may not easily integrate into normal conscious awareness. Kyle Broflovsky's brushes with mortality typically reflect his intellectual nature and strong moral convictions, placing him in dangerous situations where his commitment to principle and justice override normal self-preservation instincts and create opportunities for heroic sacrifice that bring him close to death while serving larger purposes. Beyond individual survival, his temporary deaths often occur in contexts where he is attempting to protect others or defend important values, creating a pattern where his mortality encounters serve both character development and moral instruction functions. The medical and scientific aspects of Kyle's near-death experiences often involve attempts to understand and categorize phenomena that transcend normal biological explanations, reflecting his natural inclination toward rational analysis, even when confronting experiences that challenge the adequacy of purely empirical approaches to understanding reality. His intellectual processing of mortality encounters creates opportunities for exploring the relationship between scientific knowledge and existential mystery, revealing both the power and limitations of rational investigation when applied to ultimate questions about life and death. Kyle's recovery from temporary death frequently involves community support and collaborative effort that demonstrates the importance of social bonds and mutual aid in overcoming individual mortality crises, creating storylines that emphasize collective responsibility and the power of friendship to transcend even ultimate adversity. His experiences become opportunities for exploring how communities can mobilize resources and emotional support to help individuals recover from trauma and reintegrate into normal social functioning after extraordinary experiences. Eric Cartman's encounters with temporary death reflect his unique personality characteristics and moral development, often involving situations where his selfishness, manipulation, or disregard for others creates circumstances that place him in mortal danger, while also providing opportunities for potential redemption or moral education that may or may not result in lasting character change. His mortality encounters tend to be more directly connected to consequences of his own actions than those experienced by other characters, creating teaching moments about personal responsibility and the relationship between behavior and consequences. The mechanisms through which Cartman survives his temporary deaths often involve luck, intervention by others, or his own cunning and survival instincts, creating patterns that reinforce his sense of invulnerability, while simultaneously exposing him to experiences that should promote humility and moral reflection. The gap between the potential educational value of his near-death experiences and his actual psychological response to them reveals the complex relationship between traumatic experience and character development, suggesting that encounter with mortality alone is insufficient to guarantee positive personal growth. Cartman's community relationships during and after his mortality crises reveal the complicated dynamics of how social groups respond to the near death of individuals whose behavior has created ambivalent feelings about their continued presence within the community. His friends' responses to his temporary deaths often involve genuine concern mixed with recognition that his absence might solve certain social problems, creating moral conflicts about how much effort should be invested in preserving the life of someone whose continued existence creates ongoing challenges for others. The broader pattern of temporary death and resurrection within the South Park universe suggests a reality where the boundary between life and death remains permeable and subject to various influences, including medical technology, supernatural intervention, community will, and narrative necessity that transcends normal biological constraints. This flexibility allows for exploration of mortality themes without the permanent consequences that would fundamentally alter character, relationships, and story possibilities, creating space for philosophical investigation within entertainment context. The medical and scientific explanations offered for various resurrections reflect contemporary cultural attitudes toward death, dying, and the possibility of life extension or revival through technological intervention, often satirizing both excessive faith in medical technology and unrealistic expectations about science's ability to overcome fundamental biological limitations. Episodes that feature medical resurrection often explore the ethical implications of life extension technology while questioning whether extended life necessarily represents improved quality of existence. The psychological aftermath of temporary death experiences reveals how individuals process and integrate encounters with ultimate boundaries of human experience, including changes in personality, worldview, relationships, and life priorities that may persist long after the immediate crisis has resolved. Characters who return from temporary death often display increased wisdom, altered risk tolerance, and changed perspectives on what constitutes meaningful existence, suggesting that proximity to mortality creates opportunities for accelerated psychological development. The community response to resurrections demonstrates how social groups adapt to and integrate experiences that challenge normal expectations about mortality and the permanence of loss, including adjustments in relationship patterns, social roles, and collective understanding of what constitutes possible and impossible within their shared reality. The successful reintegration of temporarily dead characters often requires community effort and acceptance that extends beyond simple joy at their return to encompass recognition that the experience has changed them in ways that require ongoing adaptation and understanding. The spiritual and philosophical implications of temporary death and resurrection touch on fundamental questions about consciousness, identity, and the nature of existence that have occupied human thought throughout history, providing narrative vehicles for exploring these abstract concepts through concrete character experiences that make complex ideas accessible to broad audiences. The various explanations offered for resurrection phenomena reflect different worldview perspectives, while avoiding definitive answers that would close off alternative interpretations and continued philosophical exploration. The long-term consequences of temporary death experiences often involve characters developing new appreciation for life's value and meaning, while also carrying psychological burdens related to survivor guilt, changed relationships with risk, and knowledge about mortality that separates them from individuals who have not confronted ultimate boundaries of existence. These lasting effects create ongoing character development opportunities, while acknowledging that encounters with death leave permanent marks on consciousness and behavior. The relationship between temporary death and permanent character growth reveals complex dynamics where brief encounters with ultimate adversity can catalyze lasting positive changes in personality, values, and behavior, while also creating vulnerabilities and sensitivities that may require ongoing support and understanding from friends and family. The educational potential of near-death experiences operates through both direct insight and gradual integration of new perspectives into daily life and decision-making processes. The mythological and archetypal dimensions of death and resurrection stories within South Park connect individual character experiences to broader cultural narratives about renewal, transformation, and the possibility of overcoming ultimate adversity through courage, community support, and divine or supernatural intervention that transcends normal limitations of individual human agency and biological possibility. In the gentle recognition that temporary death serves both narrative convenience and profound philosophical exploration, we discover that these experiences offer valuable opportunities for examining how individuals and communities can grow through encounters with ultimate adversity while maintaining hope for renewal and transformation that transcends the common, apparent finality of mortality's boundaries. In the intricate social fabric of South Park, Colorado, where children navigate complex moral landscapes, while adults struggle with their own psychological limitations and institutional responsibilities, the deaths of grown-up community members create profound ripples that extend far beyond immediate grief to encompass fundamental questions about authority, stability, and the psychological foundations that children require for healthy development in an uncertain world. Adult mortality within this animated universe serves multiple narrative functions, from providing commentary on contemporary social issues to exploring how communities process loss while maintaining continuity of essential services and relationships that sustain daily life. The psychological impact of adult deaths on child characters reveals the complex ways that young minds attempt to understand and integrate experiences of loss that challenge their basic assumptions about safety, permanence, and the reliability of the grown-up world that should provide protection and guidance during their formative years. When authority figures, caretakers, and community leaders die, children must grapple not only with the immediate emotional pain of losing someone they cared about, but also with broader existential questions about their own vulnerability and the stability of the social systems they depend upon for survival and development. Miss Diane Choksondick's death represents one of the most significant adult losses in the series, demonstrating how the sudden removal of a consistent authority figure can create psychological disruption that extends far beyond simple sadness to encompass confusion about rules, expectations, and the continuity of educational and social structures that children rely upon for their sense of order and predictability. Her role as fourth-grade teacher placed her in a position of daily contact and influence with the main characters, making her death a particularly intimate loss that affects their immediate environment and daily routines. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Miss Choksondick's demise create additional layers of psychological complexity for the children, who must process not only the fact of her death but also the unanswered questions about how and why she died, introducing elements of uncertainty and potential guilt that complicate normal grief processes. The discovery of her body and the subsequent investigation reveal how children's natural curiosity about adult lives can become entangled with traumatic experiences that expose them to aspects of grown-up existence they are not psychologically prepared to understand or integrate. The community response to Miss Choksondick's death demonstrates how adult institutions attempt to manage children's exposure to mortality while maintaining educational continuity and social stability, revealing both the caring intentions and practical limitations of systems designed to protect young people from traumatic experiences. The adults' efforts to shield the children from disturbing details about their teacher's death reflect broader cultural anxieties about childhood innocence and the appropriate timing for introducing young minds to life's darker realities. The selection and introduction of replacement authority figures following significant adult deaths creates opportunities for exploring how communities adapt to loss while attempting to maintain essential functions and relationships that children require for continued development and security. The process of accepting new teachers, caregivers, or community leaders often involves complex negotiations between honoring the memory of deceased individuals and embracing change necessary for continued growth and progress. The deaths of various parent figures throughout the series create particularly intense psychological challenges for child characters who must confront the possibility that their own primary caregivers might also be vulnerable to mortality, introducing anxiety and insecurity that can affect their basic sense of safety and attachment security. Episodes that feature parental death or near-death experiences often explore how children develop coping mechanisms for managing fears about losing their most essential relationships and support systems. The specific circumstances that lead to adult deaths within the South Park universe often reflect broader social commentary about contemporary risks and dangers that affect grown-up lives, including workplace hazards, medical crises, violence, and accidents that illustrate the various ways that modern existence creates mortality risks for individuals who should theoretically possess the resources and knowledge necessary to protect themselves from harm. These adult deaths serve educational functions by highlighting social problems while also providing opportunities for community reflection and potential reform. The professional and institutional deaths that occur throughout the series, including various school administrators, government officials, and business leaders, create opportunities for examining how power structures and social hierarchies adapt to the removal of key individuals while maintaining essential community functions. The deaths of authority figures often reveal the arbitrary nature of many social arrangements, while demonstrating both the resilience and fragility of institutional systems that communities depend upon for order and governance. The way that different adult deaths are mourned and memorialized reveals community values and priorities, showing how social groups determine which losses deserve extensive grieving and commemoration versus those that are processed more quickly and quietly. The varying responses to different adult deaths provide insight into social hierarchies, relationship patterns, and collective decision-making processes that shape community culture and identity. The investigation and explanation of adult deaths often involve children in ways that expose them to complex moral and legal questions about responsibility, justice, and the relationship between individual actions and social consequences. Episodes that feature mysterious or suspicious adult deaths frequently place child characters in detective roles that require them to navigate grown-up ethical territories while lacking the emotional and intellectual resources that such navigation typically requires. The economic and practical consequences of adult deaths create additional layers of disruption that affect children's daily lives and future security, from changes in family financial situations to alterations in community services and educational opportunities that result from the loss of key individuals who provided essential functions. These practical impacts often persist long after the immediate emotional grief has subsided, creating ongoing challenges that require community adaptation and support. The medical and healthcare aspects of adult mortality within the series often provide commentary on contemporary healthcare systems, while exploring how communities respond to both preventable and unavoidable deaths that result from various forms of medical crisis or intervention. Episodes that feature healthcare-related adult deaths frequently examine questions about medical responsibility, treatment accessibility, and the relationship between individual health choices and community well-being. The violent deaths of adult characters create opportunities for exploring how communities process traumatic loss while protecting children from exposure to details and images that might create lasting psychological damage or trauma. The management of information about violent adult deaths reveals ongoing cultural tensions about childhood innocence, media responsibility, and the balance between transparency and protection in community communication about serious events. The accidental deaths that occur throughout the series often serve as reminders about life's fragility and unpredictability, while providing opportunities for community reflection about safety measures, risk management, and collective responsibility for protecting vulnerable community members from preventable harm. These accidental losses frequently catalyze community discussions about policy changes or behavioral modifications that might prevent similar tragedies in the future. The religious and spiritual dimensions of adult death and mourning reveal community diversity and beliefs about afterlife, meaning, and appropriate responses to mortality, creating opportunities for exploring how different worldview perspectives can coexist within pluralistic communities while providing comfort and guidance during times of loss and uncertainty. The various funeral and memorial practices that follow adult deaths demonstrate both shared values and individual differences in approaches to honoring deceased community members. The long-term psychological effects of significant adult deaths on child characters often emerge gradually through changed behavior patterns, altered relationship dynamics, and shifted perspectives on risk, trust, and the reliability of grown-up protection and guidance. These lasting impacts create ongoing character development opportunities while acknowledging that encounters with adult mortality leave permanent marks on childhood consciousness and development. The way that adult deaths affect family structures and household dynamics creates cascading changes that influence children's daily routines, emotional security, and future planning in ways that may not become fully apparent until months or years after the initial loss. The reorganization of family roles and responsibilities following adult death often requires children to assume new duties and emotional burdens that accelerate their psychological development while potentially overwhelming their coping capacities. The community support systems that emerge in response to adult deaths demonstrate both the caring potential and practical limitations of social networks, designed to help families and individuals cope with loss while maintaining essential functions and relationships. The effectiveness of these support systems often determines whether families successfully adapt to loss or become overwhelmed by the challenges that follow significant adult mortality. The educational opportunities that emerge from processing adult deaths allow children to develop greater understanding of life cycles, mortality, and the ways that communities can work together to provide comfort and practical assistance during times of crisis and transition. These learning experiences often contribute to accelerated maturity and increased empathy, while also creating emotional burdens that require ongoing support and understanding from surviving adults. The memorial and commemorative practices that follow significant adult deaths provide opportunities for community healing, while also creating lasting reminders about the individuals who have been lost and the contributions they made to collective well-being and social functioning. These memorial activities often serve therapeutic functions, while also educating younger community members about history, values, and the importance of individual contributions to collective life. In the gentle recognition that adult mortality creates profound challenges for child development, while also providing opportunities for community growth and increased empathy, we discover that these losses serve essential educational and social functions that help young people develop realistic understanding of life's limitations while maintaining hope for meaningful contribution and lasting positive impact within their communities and relationships. In the complex intersection between reality and fiction that characterizes much of South Park's satirical approach to contemporary culture, the treatment of celebrity and historical figure deaths reveals sophisticated commentary on how modern society processes fame, mortality, and the relationship between public personas and private humanity. The show's willingness to incorporate real-world deaths into its fictional universe creates unique opportunities for exploring cultural attitudes towards celebrity, grief, and the ways that media representation shapes public understanding of loss and mourning in an age of constant information and parasocial relationships with public figures. The philosophical foundations underlying the series' approach to celebrity mortality reflect deeper questions about the nature of fame, the construction of public identity, and the ways that individuals become transformed into cultural symbols that transcend their biological existence to serve broader social and psychological functions within collective consciousness. When celebrities die, either in reality or within the fictional South Park universe, their deaths often carry meanings and implications that extend far beyond personal loss to encompass cultural commentary, political critique, an examination of how communities create and destroy the public figures who serve as focal points for collective hopes, fears, and aspirations. The delicate balance that the show's creators must navigate when incorporating real-world celebrity deaths into their fictional narratives requires careful consideration of timing, tone, and cultural sensitivity, while maintaining their characteristic irreverence and willingness to challenge conventional wisdom about appropriate responses to loss and mourning. This balance becomes particularly complex when dealing with deaths that occur close to episode production schedules, creating pressure to respond quickly to current events while ensuring that commentary remains thoughtful rather than merely exploitative or sensationalistic. The transformation of living celebrities into fictional characters within the South Park universe creates opportunities for exploring the gap between public personas and private reality, while examining how media representation and public vote expectation can create impossible standards and pressures that contribute to the psychological struggles that many famous individuals experience throughout their careers and personal lives. Episodes that feature celebrity characters often reveal the isolation, manipulation, and dehumanization that can result from extreme fame and public scrutiny. The deaths of fictional celebrities within the show's universe serve multiple narrative functions, from providing immediate comedic opportunities to offering platforms for broader cultural critique about entertainment industry practices, media responsibility, and public consumption of celebrity suffering and tragedy. These fictional celebrity deaths often exaggerate or satirize real-world patterns in celebrity culture, while providing safe distance for exploring sensitive topics that might be too controversial or painful to address directly. The historical figure deaths that appear throughout the series create opportunities for educational commentary about past events, while examining how historical narratives are constructed, maintained, and revised to serve contemporary political and social purposes. The show's treatment of historical mortality often reveals the arbitrary nature of historical memory and the ways that certain deaths become symbolically significant, while others are forgotten or minimized depending on cultural values and political convenience. The specific mechanisms through which celebrity and historical deaths are portrayed often involve elements of absurdity and exaggeration that serve both comedic and analytical functions, using humor to highlight serious points about celebrity culture, historical interpretation, and the ways that public figures become reduced to simplistic symbols that obscure their complex humanity and individual circumstances. These exaggerated portrayals often reveal more truth about cultural attitudes toward fame and power than more realistic representations might achieve. The community response to celebrity deaths within the South Park universe frequently satirizes real-world patterns of public mourning, media coverage, and the commercialization of grief that transforms personal tragedy into entertainment and marketing opportunities. Episodes that feature celebrity deaths often examine how communities use public mourning as vehicles for expressing their own emotions and concerns, while potentially losing sight of the actual individuals who have died. The children's reactions to celebrity deaths provide insight into how young minds process the loss of public figures who may have seemed immortal or invulnerable due to their fame and media presence, revealing the ways that celebrity culture can create false intimacy and emotional investment in individuals whom audiences have never actually met or known personally. These reactions often demonstrate both the power and limitations of parasocial relationships in providing genuine emotional support and connection. The media representation of celebrity deaths within the show often provides critique of journalism practices, entertainment industry responses, and the broader cultural machinery that transforms individual mortality into public spectacle and commercial opportunity. Episodes that examine media coverage of celebrity deaths frequently reveal the tension between public interest commercial motivation, and respect for individual dignity and family privacy during times of loss and mourning. The economic dimensions of celebrity death often receive satirical treatment that examines how fame and mortality become commodified through merchandising, tribute products, and various forms of exploitation that capitalize on public grief and nostalgia, while potentially dishonoring the memory and legacy of deceased individuals. These economic critiques often extend beyond individual cases to encompass broader questions about capitalism, celebrity culture, and the monetization of human emotion and experience. The political implications of certain celebrity and historical figure deaths create opportunities for examining how mortality becomes entangled with ideological conflict, cultural identity, and collective memory in ways that serve partisan purposes, while potentially obscuring more complex truths about individual lives and historical circumstances. Episodes that deal with politically significant deaths often reveal how different groups interpret the same events according to their pre-existing beliefs and priorities. The international dimensions of celebrity culture and death provide platforms for examining how globalization has created worldwide celebrity figures whose deaths affect diverse communities across cultural and national boundaries, while also revealing persistent differences in how various societies understand fame, mortality, and appropriate responses to public loss and mourning. These international perspectives often highlight both universal and culturally specific aspects of grief and celebrity worship. The generational differences in responses to celebrity deaths often receive attention that examines how different age cohorts relate to public figures and process their mortality according to their own life experiences, cultural references, and relationship with media technology and celebrity culture. Episodes that explore generational responses to celebrity death often reveal broader patterns in cultural change and the evolution of public-private boundaries in contemporary society. The psychological impact of repeated exposure to celebrity deaths through media coverage creates opportunities for examining how constant information about mortality and tragedy affects individual mental health and collective social functioning, particularly in an era of 24-hour news cycles and social media that intensify and accelerate public responses to tragic events. The show's treatment of media saturation often reveals both the benefits and costs of increased access to information about public figures and current events. The memorial and commemorative practices that follow celebrity deaths provide opportunities for examining how communities create lasting tributes, while also critiquing the ways that memorialization can become commercialized or politicized, in ways that serve purposes beyond honoring deceased individuals. Episodes that feature celebrity memorials often explore tensions between genuine respect and exploitation of public sentiment and nostalgia. The conspiracy theories and alternative explanations that often surround celebrity deaths receive satirical treatment that examines how public skepticism toward official narratives can lead to elaborate speculation and myth-making that may serve psychological needs while potentially dishonoring actual circumstances and individual agency. These conspiracy-related episodes often explore broader themes about trust in authority, media literacy, and the human tendency to seek complex explanations for events that may have simpler causes. The influence of celebrity deaths on popular culture and artistic expression creates opportunities for examining how mortality becomes transformed into creative inspiration, while also potentially exploiting tragedy for commercial or artistic purposes that may conflict with respect for deceased individuals and their families. Episodes that explore cultural responses to celebrity death often reveal complex relationships between art, commerce, and human dignity. The long-term legacy questions that surround celebrity and historical figure deaths provide platforms for examining how individual contributions are evaluated, preserved, and transmitted to future generations, while acknowledging that such evaluations often reflect contemporary values and priorities, rather than objective assessment of historical significance or personal worth. These legacy-focused episodes often explore how death can either preserve or destroy reputation depending on cultural context and timing. In the thoughtful recognition that celebrity and historical mortality serves as a lens through which to examine broader questions about fame, memory, and cultural values, we discover that these deaths provide valuable opportunities for reflecting on how societies create and maintain collective meaning, while processing the reality that even the most prominent and seemingly permanent public figures remain subject to the same biological limitations that affect all human existence, reminding us of our shared mortality and the importance of treating all individuals with dignity, regardless of their public status or cultural significance. In the darker corridors of South Park's animated landscape, where comedy and tragedy intersect to create profound commentary on human nature and social organization, the phenomenon of death through violence and conflict reveals some of the most complex and psychologically challenging themes that the series has ever attempted to explore. These violent deaths serve multiple narrative functions simultaneously, providing immediate dramatic impact while offering deeper examination of how communities process traumatic loss, how individuals respond to witnessing or participating in violence, and how societies attempt to maintain moral order when confronted with the reality that human beings possess remarkable capacity for both creation and destruction. The psychological mechanisms through which child characters process violent death reveal the sophisticated understanding of trauma psychology that underlies even the most seemingly absurd or comedic presentations of mortality through conflict. When young minds encounter violence that results in death, their natural protective mechanisms attempt to create cognitive frameworks that can contain and make sense of experiences that fundamentally challenge their basic assumptions about safety, justice, and the predictability of cause and effect relationships in their social environment. The war-related deaths that occur during various South Park conflicts create opportunities for exploring how entire communities mobilize for violence while attempting to maintain their essential humanity and moral values in the face of circumstances that seem to require abandoning normal, ethical constraints in service of survival or ideological commitment. These wartime mortality experiences often reveal the tension between individual conscience and collective pressure, while examining how ordinary people become capable of extraordinary violence when social conditions support or demand such transformation. The specific circumstances surrounding the Imagination Land conflict demonstrate how even fictional or metaphorical wars can produce genuine psychological casualties and traumatic responses that affect real-world relationships and individual mental health long after the immediate conflict has ended. The deaths that occur within this imaginary realm carry real emotional weight for the characters who experience them, suggesting that the psychological impact of witnessing or participating in violence may be independent of whether that violence occurs in physical or purely mental spaces. The children's varying responses to war-related violence reveal different personality types and coping mechanisms, from Stan's empathetic absorption of others' pain to Kyle's intellectual attempts to understand and categorize violent experiences, from Cartman's opportunistic exploitation of chaos to Kenny's stoic acceptance of mortality as an inevitable aspect of existence. These different response patterns provide insight into how individual psychological characteristics shape the processing of traumatic experiences, while also demonstrating that there are multiple valid ways to cope with exposure to violence and death. The adult community's response to children's exposure to war-related mortality often reveals the inadequacy of traditional protective mechanisms when extraordinary circumstances overwhelm normal social safeguards and institutional support systems. The failure of parents, teachers, and other authority figures to adequately prepare children for or help them process violent experiences demonstrates broader social limitations in addressing trauma, while highlighting the resilience and adaptability that children often display when adult protection proves insufficient. The escalation patterns that characterize many South Park conflicts reveal how individual disputes can spiral into community-wide violence through mechanisms of retaliation, misunderstanding, and the amplification of personal grievances into ideological or tribal conflicts that take on lives of their own, independent of their original causes. These escalation dynamics provide valuable insight into how violence becomes self-perpetuating, while examining the specific decision points where conflicts might be de-escalated or redirected toward non-violent resolution. The role of weapons and technology in violent deaths throughout the series provides commentary on contemporary debates about gun violence, military technology, and the relationship between available tools and the likelihood that conflicts will result in serious injury or death. Episodes that feature weapon-related deaths often examine how access to dangerous tools can transform manageable disputes into tragic outcomes, while exploring questions about individual responsibility versus social policy in preventing violence-related mortality. The gang violence and organized conflict that occasionally appears in South Park episodes creates opportunities for examining how economic desperation, social exclusion, and lack of legitimate opportunities for advancement can create conditions where violence becomes a rational response to systemic injustice or personal desperation. These episodes often reveal the complex social factors that contribute to violent behavior, while avoiding simple moral judgments that might obscure more nuanced understanding of how communities can address root causes of violence. The international and political dimensions of violence-related deaths provide platforms for examining how local communities become entangled in broader geopolitical conflicts, while exploring the ways that abstract political ideas can motivate real violence and genuine sacrifice from individuals who may have limited understanding of the larger forces that shape their local experiences. These internationally focused episodes often reveal the gap between political rhetoric and lived experience, while examining how ordinary people become casualties of forces beyond their control or comprehension. The self-defense and protection-motivated violence that sometimes results in death creates complex moral landscapes where traditional categories of victim and perpetrator become complicated by circumstances that force individuals to choose between their own survival and others' lives. Episodes that explore defensive violence often examine the psychological aftermath of killing in self-defense, while revealing how even justified violence can create lasting trauma and moral injury for those who participate in it. The accidental deaths that result from violent situations demonstrate how conflicts intended to cause minor harm or assert dominance can escalate beyond participants' intentions to produce tragic outcomes that no one desired or anticipated. These accidental violent deaths often serve as cautionary tales about the unpredictability of physical conflict, while examining how individuals and communities process responsibility and guilt when outcomes exceed intentions. The revenge-motivated violence that appears throughout the series provides opportunities for exploring cycles of retaliation and the psychological mechanisms through which individuals justify harmful actions by reference to previous wrongs committed against them or their communities. Episodes that feature revenge violence often examine whether such retaliation actually provides psychological satisfaction or resolution, while exploring alternative approaches to processing anger and seeking justice. The ritualistic or ceremonial violence that occasionally appears in South Park episodes creates space for examining how cultures use controlled violence as expressions of identity, tradition, or spiritual belief, while exploring the tension between cultural relativism and universal human rights principles. These cultural violence episodes often reveal the complexity of making moral judgments across different value systems, while acknowledging that some practices may be harmful, regardless of their cultural significance. The psychological transformation that occurs in individuals who participate in or witness serious violence provides opportunities for character development that would be impossible under normal circumstances, while examining how exposure to extreme situations can reveal hidden aspects of personality or catalyze fundamental changes in values, priorities, and self-understanding. Characters who survive violent conflicts often display lasting changes that affect their relationships and life choices long after the immediate danger has passed. The community healing processes that follow episodes of serious violence demonstrate both the resilience and fragility of social bonds, while examining how communities can work together to process collective trauma and prevent future violence through changes in social structures, cultural practices, or individual behavior patterns. These post-conflict episodes often explore the balance between justice and reconciliation, while examining practical approaches to preventing recurrence of violence. The media representation and public discourse surrounding violence-related deaths provide opportunities for critiquing how journalism, entertainment, and political commentary can either contribute to or help prevent violence through their choices about how to frame conflicts, identify causes, and propose solutions. Episodes that examine media responses to violence often reveal how public conversation about tragic events can either promote understanding and prevention or amplify fear and anger in ways that increase likelihood of future violence. The legal and institutional responses to violence-related deaths create opportunities for examining how justice systems attempt to balance punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation, and public safety, while acknowledging that formal legal processes may be inadequate for addressing the complex social and psychological factors that contribute to violent behavior. These institutional response episodes often explore tensions between different theories of justice, while examining practical limitations of legal approaches to preventing violence. The long-term psychological consequences of exposure to violence-related death often involve complex combinations of trauma symptoms, moral injury, and changed worldview that can affect individuals' capacity for trust, intimacy, and hope, while also potentially creating wisdom and resilience that serve them well in future challenges. The series' treatment of these long-term effects often acknowledges that recovery from violence exposure is possible, while recognizing that some impacts may be permanent. The educational potential of examining violence-related mortality through animated storytelling provides opportunities for audiences to explore difficult questions about human nature, social organization, and conflict resolution within contexts that feel psychologically safe, while maintaining enough emotional distance to permit rational analysis and moral reflection rather than purely emotional response. In the somber recognition that violence represents one of humanity's most persistent challenges, while also revealing our capacity for moral growth and social learning. We discover that examining death through conflict provides essential opportunities for understanding how communities can work to prevent violence while supporting those who have been affected by traumatic experiences, ultimately contributing to the creation of social environments where conflicts can be resolved without resorting to harmful actions that create lasting damage to individuals and relationships. In the shadowed realm where South Park's animated universe intersects with forces beyond ordinary human understanding, supernatural and horror-themed deaths create some of the most psychologically complex and philosophically profound explorations of mortality that the series has ever attempted. These encounters with otherworldly death transcend the boundaries of conventional, animated storytelling to encompass questions about the nature of reality itself, the existence of forces beyond material understanding, and the ways that human consciousness responds when confronted with evidence that death may not represent the final boundary of existence, but rather a transition into realms governed by different rules and inhabited by entities whose purposes remain fundamentally alien to ordinary human comprehension. The psychological mechanisms through which characters process supernatural death experiences reveal the profound challenges that arise when ordinary cognitive frameworks prove inadequate for understanding encounters with mortality that operate according to principles that defy normal expectations about cause and effect, physical laws, and the relationship between consciousness and embodied existence. These supernatural death encounters often force individuals to expand their understanding of what constitutes possible and impossible, while questioning fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality and their own place within cosmic orders that may extend far beyond human knowledge or control. The horror-themed episodes that feature supernatural death often draw upon deep psychological archetypes and cultural traditions that connect contemporary animated storytelling with ancient human fears and fascinations about what lies beyond the threshold of ordinary mortality, creating narratives that resonate with primal anxieties while providing safe contexts for exploring these fears through the protective distance that cartoon representation provides. These episodes demonstrate how animated media can serve therapeutic functions by allowing audiences to confront ultimate fears about death and the unknown within frameworks that feel manageable and non-threatening. The specific supernatural entities that cause or embody death within South Park's horror episodes often represent different aspects of human anxiety about mortality and the afterlife, from malevolent spirits seeking revenge for past wrongs to cosmic forces that operate according to incomprehensible logic that reduces human concerns to insignificance. These supernatural death dealers frequently serve as external manifestations of internal psychological conflicts, while also providing opportunities for exploring different cultural and religious traditions about what forms consciousness might take after biological death. The ghost appearances and undead characters that populate various supernatural episodes create opportunities for examining questions about personal identity, persistence after death, the relationship between consciousness and physical embodiment, and the possibility that emotional attachments and unresolved conflicts might enable some form of continued existence beyond biological mortality. These ghostly encounters often reveal more about the psychological needs of living characters than about the actual nature of post-mortem existence, suggesting that supernatural experiences may serve important functions in helping individuals process grief and unfinished business with deceased loved ones. The children's responses to supernatural death experiences demonstrate remarkable adaptability and resilience in the face of phenomena that would likely traumatize adults who have developed more rigid expectations about reality, possibility, Their ability to accept and integrate supernatural encounters while maintaining their essential personality characteristics suggests that young minds possess flexibility and openness that may be gradually lost through socialization, processes that emphasize materialistic explanations for all experiences. Stan Marsh's encounters with supernatural death often reflect his natural empathy and emotional sensitivity, making him particularly vulnerable to ghostly influences and supernatural manipulation, while also providing him with insights into the emotional dimensions of post-mortem existence that more skeptical characters might miss or dismiss. His supernatural experiences frequently involve attempts to help troubled spirits find peace or resolution, demonstrating how his caring nature extends beyond ordinary human relationships to encompass compassion for entities whose existence challenges normal categories of living and dead. Kyle Broflovsky's intellectual approach to supernatural death creates complex tensions between his rational worldview and direct experiences that seem to contradict materialistic explanations for consciousness and mortality, forcing him to develop more nuanced understanding of the relationship between scientific knowledge and experiential reality. His attempts to analyze and categorize supernatural phenomena often reveal both the power and limitations of rational investigation when applied to experiences that may transcend normal categories of empirical analysis. Eric Cartman's interactions with supernatural death frequently involve attempts to exploit otherworldly forces for personal advantage, demonstrating how his manipulative tendencies extend beyond ordinary human relationships to encompass efforts to control or bargain with entities whose power and motivations he fundamentally misunderstands. His supernatural encounters often result in consequences that exceed his ability to manage or contain, creating situations where his usual tactics prove not only ineffective but actively dangerous. Kenny McCormick's unique relationship with mortality creates special resonance with supernatural death themes, as his own cyclical dying and returning suggests that he occupies a liminal space between ordinary human existence and whatever forces govern life and death transitions. His encounters with supernatural entities often involve recognition and mutual understanding that reflects his extensive personal experience with crossing boundaries between life and death states. The seasonal and episodic nature of many supernatural death stories within South Park reflects broader cultural patterns around horror entertainment and the ways that communities use ritualized encounters with fear and mortality to process anxieties while also celebrating survival and resilience in the face of existential threats. Halloween episodes and other horror-themed storylines often provide sanctioned opportunities for exploring taboo subjects and forbidden emotions within contexts that feel safe and contained. The parody elements that frequently appear in supernatural horror episodes demonstrate how humor can serve as both defense mechanism and analytical tool for examining serious themes about mortality and the unknown, allowing audiences to confront frightening concepts while maintaining enough emotional distance to engage in rational reflection rather than purely emotional response. These parodic treatments often reveal absurdities in traditional horror narratives while preserving their essential insights about human psychology and social dynamics. The religious and spiritual dimensions of supernatural death experiences provide opportunities for exploring different cultural traditions and belief systems about afterlife, divine judgment, and the relationship between moral behavior and post-mortem consequences, creating narratives that examine these concepts without necessarily endorsing any particular theological position. Episodes that feature religious supernatural elements often reveal both the comfort and terror that can result from believing in forces beyond human understanding and control. The technological interactions with supernatural death create fascinating explorations of how contemporary scientific advancement might intersect with traditional spiritual concepts, examining whether modern tools and knowledge can enhance human ability to communicate with or understand entities whose existence transcends normal physical limitations. These technology-supernatural crossover episodes often explore tensions between materialistic and spiritual worldviews, while suggesting possibilities for synthesis or integration. The community response to supernatural death events reveals how social groups attempt to maintain normal functioning and rational discourse when confronted with evidence that challenges fundamental assumptions about reality and possibility, demonstrating both the flexibility and rigidity of collective belief systems when faced with anomalous experiences. These community responses often reflect broader cultural tensions between scientific skepticism and spiritual openness, while examining how individuals navigate conflicting evidence about the nature of existence. The psychological aftermath of supernatural death encounters often involves lasting changes in worldview, risk tolerance, and spiritual beliefs that persist long after the immediate supernatural experiences have ended, creating character development opportunities that would be impossible through ordinary life experiences alone. Characters who survive encounters with supernatural death frequently display increased wisdom and spiritual awareness, combined with ongoing vulnerability to otherworldly influences. The moral and ethical dimensions of supernatural death create complex questions about responsibility, justice, and the appropriate response to entities whose existence and motivations may transcend ordinary human moral categories, forcing characters to develop more sophisticated ethical frameworks that can accommodate the possibility of consciousness forms that operate according to different principles than those governing human behavior. The educational potential of supernatural death stories extends beyond entertainment to encompass genuine exploration of philosophical and spiritual questions that have occupied human thought throughout history, providing accessible entry points for examining concepts about consciousness, identity, mortality, and the possibility of existence beyond physical death that might otherwise remain abstract or intimidating for many audiences. The therapeutic functions of engaging with supernatural death through animated storytelling allow individuals to explore their own fears and beliefs about mortality and the afterlife within contexts that feel safe and manageable, while also providing opportunities for vicarious experience of encounters with the unknown that might help prepare them psychologically for their own eventual confrontation with ultimate questions about existence and meaning. In the gentle recognition that supernatural death represents humanity's ongoing attempt to understand and come to terms with the ultimate mystery of what lies beyond the threshold of ordinary mortality, we discover that these animated explorations of otherworldly death serve essential functions in helping individuals and communities process existential anxieties, while remaining open to possibilities that transcend current understanding, ultimately contributing to the expansion of human consciousness and the development of more complete perspectives on the nature of existence itself. In the peculiar alchemy of animated storytelling, where tragedy and comedy merge to create unexpectedly profound insights into the human condition, accidental and comedic deaths within the South Park universe reveal some of the most complex philosophical tensions about the nature of mortality, the role of chance in human existence, and the ways that communities attempt to find meaning and maintain psychological equilibrium when confronted with losses that defy rational explanation or moral categorization. These deaths, which emerge from mishaps, misunderstandings, and the simple unpredictability of existence itself, serve multiple narrative functions while exploring deeper questions about responsibility, randomness, and the delicate balance between order and chaos that governs both individual lives and collective social experience. The psychological mechanisms through which characters process deaths that result from comedy and accident reveal the sophisticated cognitive strategies that human minds employ when attempting to understand losses that cannot be easily categorized within normal frameworks of cause and effect, moral responsibility, or meaningful purpose. When death occurs through slapstick comedy or simple misfortune, the usual psychological tools for processing grief and trauma prove inadequate, forcing individuals to develop new approaches to understanding mortality that can accommodate the apparent randomness and absurdity that characterizes much of human existence. The specific role that slapstick comedy plays in South Park's treatment of mortality creates unique opportunities for exploring how humor can serve both as a defense mechanism against existential anxiety and as a vehicle for examining serious questions about life's fragility and unpredictability without becoming overwhelmed by the emotional weight of these realizations. The exaggerated physical comedy that often leads to death in these episodes provides psychological distance that allows audiences to confront their own mortality fears while maintaining enough detachment to engage in rational reflection about the themes being explored. The accidental nature of many comedic deaths creates profound moral complexities around questions of responsibility, guilt, and the appropriate response to losses that no one intended or desired, but which result from chains of causation that might have been interrupted at various points through different choices or greater awareness. These accidental deaths often reveal how seemingly minor decisions or moments of inattention can have catastrophic consequences that extend far beyond what anyone could have reasonably anticipated or prevented. The children's reactions to witnessing or causing accidental death demonstrate remarkable psychological resilience, combined with genuine moral sophistication as they attempt to navigate feelings of guilt, responsibility, and helplessness when confronted with outcomes that exceed both their intentions and their ability to understand or control. Their responses often reveal more mature understanding of moral complexity than many adults display when confronting similar situations, suggesting that direct experience with consequence and loss can catalyze accelerated ethical development. Stan Marsh's encounters with accidental death typically reflect his natural empathy and tendency towards self-blame, creating situations where he assumes disproportionate responsibility for outcomes that result from factors beyond his reasonable control or anticipation. His psychological processing of accidental deaths often involves extensive self-examination and guilt that demonstrates both his moral sensitivity and his tendency toward excessive personal accountability that may interfere with healthy grief processing and emotional recovery. Kyle Broflovsky's intellectual approach to understanding accidental death creates complex analytical frameworks that attempt to identify underlying causes, assign appropriate levels of responsibility, and develop preventive measures that might reduce the likelihood of similar tragedies in the future. His systematic approach to processing accidental loss often provides valuable insights, while also potentially creating additional psychological burden through his detailed examination of all the ways that tragic outcomes might have been prevented. Eric Cartman's response to accidental deaths frequently involves attempts to exploit the situation for personal advantage, or to deflect responsibility away from himself and toward others, demonstrating how certain personality types can use even tragic circumstances as opportunities for manipulation and self-promotion. His behavior in the aftermath of accidental deaths often reveals the extent to which empathy deficits can prevent individuals from processing loss appropriately, while creating additional harm for those who are genuinely grieving. Kenny McCormick's unique perspective on accidental death, shaped by his extensive personal experience with mortality, often provides wisdom and acceptance that helps other characters process their own responses to unexpected loss, while also revealing how repeated exposure to death can create both resilience and emotional distance that may protect against overwhelming grief but potentially limit capacity for normal emotional engagement. The community response to accidental deaths demonstrates how social groups attempt to maintain stability and coherence when confronted with losses that challenge assumptions about safety, predictability, and the relationship between individual actions and their consequences. These community reactions often reveal both the supportive potential and destructive capacity of collective responses to tragedy, as groups struggle to balance accountability with forgiveness, prevention with acceptance of life's inherent risks. The legal and institutional responses to accidental deaths create opportunities for examining how formal systems attempt to categorize and respond to losses that may not fit neatly into established categories of negligence, criminal behavior, or natural disaster, revealing both the strengths and limitations of institutional approaches to processing complex moral and practical questions that arise from unexpected mortality. The specific mechanisms through which accidental deaths occur in South Park episodes often involve elaborate chains of causation that demonstrate how seemingly unrelated actions and circumstances can combine to produce tragic outcomes that no single individual could have anticipated or prevented, creating situations that challenge conventional understanding of personal responsibility and moral accountability, while highlighting life's fundamental unpredictability. The role of technology and modern conveniences in creating opportunities for accidental death provides commentary on how technological advancement can create new forms of risk and vulnerability, while also potentially providing tools for prevention and response that might reduce the likelihood or severity of accidental harm. Episodes that feature technology-related accidental deaths often explore tensions between progress and safety, while examining how communities can adapt to new forms of risk. The seasonal and environmental factors that contribute to accidental deaths create opportunities for examining how communities adapt to natural hazards and cyclical risks, while developing cultural practices and institutional responses that balance appropriate caution with continued engagement in activities that carry inherent dangers but also provide important benefits for individual development and community life. The educational dimensions of accidental death experiences often involve harsh but valuable lessons about risk assessment, personal responsibility, and the importance of attention and care in daily activities, creating learning opportunities that might not be available through less dramatic or consequential experiences. These educational aspects often emerge gradually as characters process their experiences and integrate new understanding into their future decision-making and behavior patterns. The psychological aftermath of causing or witnessing accidental death frequently involves complex combinations of guilt, anxiety, and changed risk tolerance that can affect individuals' willingness to engage in normal activities and relationships, creating ongoing challenges that require community support and understanding to prevent isolation and continued psychological harm. The long-term effects of these experiences often include both positive changes in safety awareness and potentially limiting changes in confidence and spontaneity. The humor that emerges from the gap between tragic outcomes and absurd causes creates unique opportunities for exploring how comedy can serve therapeutic functions while also potentially creating ethical complications around the appropriate response to genuine loss and suffering. Episodes that successfully balance comedy with respect for the reality of loss demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how humor can facilitate emotional processing without minimizing the genuine impact of tragedy. The philosophical questions raised by accidental and comedic death touch on fundamental issues about the nature of existence, the role of chance in human affairs, and the possibility of finding meaning in experiences that seem to resist rational explanation or moral categorization. These philosophical dimensions often provide frameworks for characters and audiences to develop more nuanced understanding of life's complexity while maintaining hope and engagement despite awareness of life's inherent unpredictability. The memorial and remembrance practices that follow accidental deaths often involve attempts to create meaning and honor deceased individuals, while also processing the cognitive dissonance that results from losses that seem to contradict assumptions about justice, purpose, and the relationship between moral behavior and life outcomes. These memorial activities frequently serve important therapeutic functions while also creating opportunities for community reflection and potential policy changes. The preventive measures and safety improvements that sometimes result from accidental deaths demonstrate how communities can transform tragedy into positive change, while also revealing the ongoing tension between accepting life's inherent risks and taking reasonable precautions to protect vulnerable community members from preventable harm. These preventive responses often involve difficult decisions about resource allocation and the appropriate balance between safety and freedom. In the gentle recognition that life's most profound lessons often emerge from its most unexpected and seemingly senseless experiences, we discover that accidental and comedic deaths serve essential functions in helping individuals and communities develop more complete understanding of existence's complexity while maintaining the psychological flexibility necessary to find meaning and continue growing, despite awareness that tragedy can strike without warning or apparent purpose, ultimately contributing to the development of wisdom and resilience that enable continued engagement with life's possibilities despite full knowledge of its inherent uncertainties and limitations. In the sophisticated tapestry of animated social commentary, where individual mortality becomes a lens through which to examine broader cultural and political issues, South Park's treatment of death as a vehicle for societal critique reveals one of the most intellectually complex aspects of the series' approach to storytelling and moral education. These deaths that serve specific social or political commentary functions transcend simple narrative convenience to encompass profound examinations of how communities organize themselves, how power structures perpetuate injustice, and how individual suffering often reflects systemic failures that extend far beyond personal circumstances to encompass institutional negligence, cultural blindness, and collective moral compromise. The philosophical foundations underlying the use of death as social metaphor reflect sophisticated understanding of how mortality functions within human consciousness as the ultimate equalizer that strips away artificial distinctions and reveals fundamental truths about value, meaning, and the relationships between individual experience and collective responsibility. When deaths occur within South Park episodes as direct consequences of social problems or institutional failures, these losses serve educational functions that might be difficult to achieve through more abstract forms of political or social commentary. The specific mechanisms through which social commentary deaths are constructed often involve careful attention to realistic cause and effect relationships that demonstrate how systemic issues create conditions where individual mortality becomes more likely or severe revealing the concrete human costs of abstract policy decisions and cultural practices. These deaths typically avoid simple moral categorization to encompass more complex examinations of how well-intentioned individuals can become complicit in harmful systems, while how institutional structures can produce tragic outcomes despite the good intentions of most participants. The healthcare-related deaths that appear throughout various episodes provide powerful platforms for examining contemporary American healthcare systems, including issues of access, affordability, quality of care, and the ways that economic factors can determine who lives and dies when medical intervention might make the difference between survival and mortality. These healthcare deaths often reveal how individual medical tragedies reflect broader questions about social priorities, resource allocation, and collective responsibility for ensuring that all community members have access to life-saving treatment, regardless of their economic circumstances. The environmental deaths that occur as consequences of pollution, industrial negligence, or climate-related factors create opportunities for examining how corporate decision-making and regulatory failures can create mortality risks for entire communities, while also exploring the complex relationships between economic development, environmental protection, and public health. Episodes that feature environment-related deaths often reveal how the costs of industrial activity are distributed unequally across different populations, while examining the long-term consequences of prioritizing short-term economic gains over sustainable practices. The educational system deaths and near-deaths that result from school violence, inadequate safety measures, or institutional neglect provide sobering commentary on contemporary debates about school safety, educational funding, and the responsibility of communities to protect children during their most vulnerable developmental periods. These school-related mortality incidents often reveal how educational institutions can become sites of trauma rather than nurturing when broader social conflicts and resource limitations compromise their essential protective functions. The economic inequality deaths that result from poverty, homelessness, lack of access to basic necessities, or economic exploitation create powerful narratives about how wealth distribution and economic opportunity affect individual survival prospects, while examining the moral implications of social systems that permit some community members to die from preventable causes, while others enjoy abundance and security. These economic mortality episodes often challenge viewers to consider their own complicity in systems that produce such dramatically unequal outcomes. The criminal justice system deaths that occur through police violence, incarceration conditions, or failures of legal protection demonstrate how institutions designed to promote safety and justice can themselves become sources of mortality risk, particularly for vulnerable populations who lack political power or social capital to protect themselves from institutional abuse or neglect. Episodes that feature criminal justice deaths often examine complex questions about authority, accountability, and the appropriate balance between public safety and individual rights. The immigration and refugee deaths that result from border enforcement policies, deportation practices, or failure to provide adequate protection for displaced populations create opportunities for examining how national policies toward non-citizens can have life and death consequences, while exploring broader questions about moral obligations that transcend political boundaries and legal citizenship status. These immigration-related deaths often reveal tensions between national sovereignty and universal human rights principles. The mental health deaths that result from suicide, inadequate treatment, or social stigma around psychological disorders provide platforms for examining how communities respond to emotional and psychiatric crises, while revealing the often inadequate resources and understanding available for supporting individuals who struggle with mental health challenges. These mental health mortality episodes often demonstrate how social isolation and stigma can transform treatable conditions into life-threatening situations. The substance abuse deaths that occur through overdose, contaminated supplies, or lack of treatment opportunities create opportunities for examining how drug policies and social attitudes toward addiction affect individual survival, while exploring broader questions about criminalization versus medical treatment, approaches to substance use disorders. Episodes that feature substance-related deaths often reveal how punitive approaches can increase rather than decrease mortality risks for vulnerable individuals. The workplace safety deaths that result from inadequate protection, corporate cost-cutting, or regulatory failures demonstrate how economic pressures can create conditions where worker mortality becomes an acceptable cost of business operation, while examining the moral implications of employment relationships that prioritize profit over human life and safety. These workplace mortality episodes often reveal how individual workplace tragedies reflect broader patterns of labor exploitation and regulatory capture. The children's processing of socially motivated deaths often demonstrates remarkable capacity for understanding complex systemic issues, while also revealing how exposure to social injustice can accelerate political awareness and moral development in ways that might not occur through more abstract forms of civic education. Their responses to deaths that result from social problems frequently involve questions about fairness, responsibility, and possibilities for positive change that reflect sophisticated political thinking. The community organizing and advocacy that sometimes emerges in response to socially motivated deaths demonstrates how individual tragedy can catalyze collective action and social change, while also revealing the challenges involved in maintaining long-term commitment to reform efforts when immediate emotional responses fade and institutional resistance emerges. These community response patterns often show both the potential and limitations of grassroots political action. The media coverage and public discourse surrounding deaths that highlight social issues provide opportunities for examining how journalism, entertainment, and political commentary can either contribute to meaningful social change or exploit tragedy for commercial and political purposes that serve narrow interests rather than broader public welfare. Episodes that critique media responses to socially significant deaths often reveal how public conversation about tragedy can either promote understanding and reform or amplify division and conflict. The policy changes and institutional reforms that occasionally result from high-profile deaths demonstrate how individual mortality can sometimes serve as catalyst for broader social improvement, while also revealing the often inadequate and temporary nature of reforms that address symptoms rather than underlying causes of systemic problems. These policy response episodes frequently explore tensions between symbolic gestures and substantive change. The long-term social impact of deaths that serve commentary functions often extends beyond immediate policy discussions to encompass broader cultural conversations about values, priorities, and collective responsibility that may influence social attitudes and behavior patterns for years or decades after specific incidents fade from public memory. These long-term cultural effects often involve gradual shifts in social consciousness rather than dramatic immediate changes. The educational potential of examining socially motivated deaths through animated storytelling provides opportunities for audiences to explore complex political and social issues through concrete human examples rather than abstract policy discussions, creating emotional engagement that might motivate continued learning and civic participation beyond immediate entertainment consumption. The therapeutic value of processing social injustice through fictional narrative allows individuals to confront difficult realities about systemic problems while maintaining enough psychological distance to engage in rational analysis, rather than becoming overwhelmed by the scope and complexity of social challenges that require sustained collective action to address effectively. In the profound recognition that individual deaths often reflect broader social failures, while also revealing possibilities for positive change through collective action and moral commitment, we discover that examining mortality as social commentary serves essential functions in educating communities about systemic issues, while inspiring the kind of sustained engagement necessary to create more just and compassionate societies, where preventable deaths become increasingly rare through improved institutions, cultural practices, and collective commitment to protecting the most vulnerable community members from unnecessary harm. In the profound psychological landscape, where animated characters confront the ultimate reality of loss and separation, South Park's exploration of grief and mourning reveals some of the most sophisticated understanding of human emotional processing that contemporary media has ever attempted to achieve. Through the seemingly simple medium of cartoon storytelling, the series' treatment of how individuals and communities navigate the complex terrain of bereavement demonstrates remarkable insight into the psychological mechanisms through which human consciousness adapts to the absence of significant others while maintaining enough emotional stability to continue functioning and growing despite experiences that fundamentally challenge basic assumptions about permanence, security, and the reliability of important relationships. The psychological realism that underlies even the most exaggerated or comedic presentations of grief within the South Park universe reflects deep understanding of how actual mourning processes unfold across different personality types, developmental stages, and cultural contexts, creating animated representations that capture essential truths about human emotional experience, while providing safe psychological distance for audiences to explore their own relationships with loss, mortality, and the inevitable process of saying goodbye to people, places, and aspects of themselves that cannot be preserved indefinitely. The classical stages of grief, as originally articulated by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, find complex and nuanced expression throughout various South Park episodes, where characters confront significant losses, though the series demonstrates sophisticated awareness that real grief rarely follows neat sequential patterns, and more often involves cyclical, overlapping, and highly individualized responses that resist simple categorization or timeline expectations. The animated format allows for creative representation of internal emotional states that might be difficult to portray realistically, while maintaining accessibility for audiences who may lack direct experience with certain forms of loss. The denial phase of grief processing appears throughout numerous episodes, where characters initially refuse to accept the reality of death or significant loss, creating both comedic situations and genuine pathos as individuals struggle to maintain familiar patterns of thought and behavior. Despite overwhelming evidence that fundamental changes have occurred in their relational and social environments, these denial episodes often reveal how psychological protective mechanisms can serve essential functions in preventing emotional overwhelm, while also potentially creating obstacles to healthy adaptation and continued development. Stan Marsh's characteristic approach to grief processing typically involves initial emotional numbing, followed by gradual recognition of loss and eventual integration of new reality into his ongoing sense of self and relationship. though his natural empathy often creates additional complications, as he absorbs not only his own grief, but also the emotional pain of others around him who may be struggling with their own mourning processes. His grief responses frequently serve as models for healthy emotional processing, while also revealing the additional burdens that naturally empathetic individuals often carry during times of collective loss. The anger phase of grief manifests in various character responses throughout the series, from Cartman's characteristic rage and blame-seeking to more subtle forms of irritability and emotional volatility that affect characters' relationships and decision-making during periods when they are struggling to process significant losses. These anger expressions often serve important psychological functions by providing outlets for emotional energy, while also potentially creating interpersonal conflicts that complicate mourning processes and require additional community, support, and understanding. Karl Broflovsky's intellectual approach to grief often involves attempts to understand and categorize mourning experiences through rational analysis and systematic examination of emotional processes, creating both valuable insights and potential obstacles to natural emotional flow as his mind seeks logical explanations for experiences that may transcend purely rational understanding. His grief responses frequently demonstrate how intellectual sophistication can both support and complicate mourning processes, depending on whether analytical approaches enhance or interfere with natural emotional expression and mourning integration. The bargaining phase of grief appears in numerous episodes where characters attempt to negotiate with fate, divine forces, or other individuals to undo losses or prevent additional harm from occurring, creating storylines that explore both the psychological necessity of such negotiation attempts and their ultimate limitations when confronted with realities that cannot be changed through human will or effort alone. These bargaining episodes often reveal deep insights about human attachment, control, and the gradual process of accepting powerlessness over ultimate life circumstances. Kenny McCormick's unique relationship with mortality creates distinctive grief responses both in himself and others, as his cyclical death and return experiences provide unusual perspectives on mourning processes, while also creating complex psychological challenges around how to grieve someone who repeatedly dies and returns, potentially complicating normal mourning patterns and creating confusion about appropriate emotional responses to loss that may be temporary rather than permanent. The depression phase of grief receives sophisticated treatment throughout various episodes where characters experience the deep sadness, lethargy, and existential questioning that often accompany recognition that significant losses cannot be undone or replaced, creating opportunities for exploring how communities can support individuals through periods of profound sadness while maintaining hope for eventual healing and renewed engagement with life's possibilities despite permanent changes in facets, circumstances, and relationships. The acceptance phase of grief appears in various forms throughout the series, from quiet resignation to active integration of loss into ongoing life narrative, demonstrating that healthy mourning outcomes can take many different forms, depending on individual personality, characteristics, cultural background, and available support systems. These acceptance episodes often reveal that successful grief processing does not require forgetting deceased individuals or minimizing the significance of loss, but rather finding ways to maintain meaningful connection with departed loved ones while continuing to invest in present relationships and future possibilities. The children's understanding of mortality within South Park demonstrates remarkable sophistication despite their chronological age, reflecting both their extensive exposure to death-related experiences and their natural psychological flexibility that allows them to adapt to difficult realities more readily than adults who may have developed more rigid expectations. about how life should unfold. Their mourning responses often serve educational functions for both other characters and audiences who may be processing their own grief experiences. The cultural and religious influences on grief processing appear throughout various episodes that explore how different belief systems and traditional practices provide frameworks for understanding death and guiding mourning behaviors, creating opportunities for examining both the supportive and limiting aspects of cultural approaches to loss, while revealing how individuals often develop syncretic approaches that combine elements from multiple traditions rather than following any single cultural prescription for appropriate grief. Response: the complicated grief that results from ambiguous losses, traumatic deaths, or relationships that involved significant conflict or abuse receives careful attention in episodes that acknowledge that mourning processes can become particularly challenging when losses involve complex emotions beyond simple sadness, including relief, guilt, anger, or confusion that complicate straightforward mourning patterns and may require additional support and understanding from community members. The anticipatory grief that occurs when characters confront potential future losses or terminal diagnoses creates opportunities for exploring how individuals and communities prepare psychologically for expected deaths while balancing realistic preparation with continued hope and engagement in present moment relationships and activities. These anticipatory grief episodes often reveal both the benefits and challenges of having advance warning about impending losses. The disenfranchised grief experienced by characters whose losses are not recognized or supported by their communities demonstrates how social attitudes and cultural blind spots can complicate mourning processes by denying individuals appropriate support and acknowledgement for relationships and losses that may be significant to them, even if they are not valued or understood by broader social groups. The physical and somatic aspects of grief processing receive attention through various episodes that acknowledge how emotional loss often manifests in physical symptoms, changes in appetite and sleep patterns, and alterations in energy levels and health status that reflect the profound connection between psychological and physiological well-being during periods of significant emotional stress and adaptation. The anniversary reactions and grief triggers that cause renewed mourning responses long after initial losses occurred demonstrate how grief processing continues throughout life, rather than concluding after specific time periods, creating ongoing opportunities for both renewed sadness and continued healing as individuals encounter reminders of departed loved ones and integrate their ongoing significance into evolving life narratives. The community healing processes that emerge in response to collective losses reveal how shared mourning can serve both supportive and potentially overwhelming functions, creating opportunities for mutual aid and understanding, while also potentially creating pressure for individuals to conform to group expectations about appropriate grief responses that may not match their personal mourning needs and patterns. The therapeutic potential of engaging with grief through animated storytelling provides valuable opportunities for audiences to explore their own mourning experiences while maintaining psychological safety and distance that allows for emotional engagement without becoming overwhelmed by personal loss experiences that may be too painful or complex to examine directly without additional support and preparation. In the gentle recognition that grief represents one of the most universal and transformative aspects of human experience, while also remaining deeply personal and individual in its specific manifestations, we discover that examining mourning processes through animated characters provides essential opportunities for learning about emotional resilience, community support, and the gradual development of wisdom and compassion that often emerges from successfully navigating the profound challenges that loss and separation create for human consciousness and relationships. In the profound contemplation of how individual mortality transcends the immediate boundaries of personal existence to create lasting ripples of meaning and transformation throughout the communities and relationships that survive beyond any single life. South Park's exploration of death's legacy reveals some of the most philosophically sophisticated insights about the relationship between temporary human existence and enduring significance that contemporary storytelling has achieved. The series demonstrates remarkable understanding of how deaths, particularly those that occur within tight-knit communities, become catalysts for ongoing change that extends far beyond the immediate grief period to encompass fundamental alterations in social dynamics, individual character development, and collective understanding of what constitutes valuable and meaningful human contribution. The psychological mechanisms through which communities create and maintain lasting memory of deceased individuals reveal complex processes of selective remembering, meaning-making, and narrative construction that transform individual lives into symbolic resources that serve ongoing social and emotional needs for surviving community members. These memorial processes often involve careful curation of deceased individuals' characteristics and contributions, emphasizing aspects that provide comfort, inspiration, or guidance, while potentially minimizing or overlooking qualities that might complicate or disturb the memorial narrative that communities construct to honor their dead. The specific ways that deaths create lasting change within the South Park universe demonstrate how mortality can serve as catalyst for personal growth, social reform, and cultural evolution that extends far beyond what deceased individuals might have achieved through continued living, suggesting that death sometimes enables forms of influence and inspiration that transcend the limitations of ordinary embodied existence. These transformative legacies often emerge gradually through complex interactions between memory, community needs, and ongoing circumstances that create opportunities for deceased individuals to continue serving important functions within their communities. The characters who are remembered most vividly and meaningfully after death often possess qualities or have experienced circumstances that make their lives particularly resonant with universal themes about courage, sacrifice, authenticity, or resilience that speak to fundamental human values and aspirations. These memorable deaths frequently involve individuals who either embodied admirable characteristics or whose deaths illuminated important truths about social problems, personal courage, or the consequences of various life choices and social arrangements. Chef Jerome McElroy's complex legacy demonstrates how beloved community figures can continue to influence social dynamics and individual development long after their deaths, particularly when their contributions involved nurturing relationships and cultural guidance that shaped multiple generations of community members. His transformation and ultimate demise create opportunities for examining how communities process complicated grief when deceased individuals' final actions or circumstances conflict with earlier positive contributions and relationships. The impact of various adult deaths on community children reveals how mortality can serve educational functions that accelerate moral development and social understanding, while also creating emotional challenges that require ongoing support and processing throughout young people's continued development. These educational legacies often involve harsh but valuable lessons about personal responsibility, social justice, institutional limitations, and the importance of appreciating and protecting valuable relationships while they remain available. Miss Choksondik's death creates lasting changes in how students approach authority, relationships, and academic engagement, demonstrating how the loss of significant teachers can fundamentally alter educational experiences, while also revealing the profound influence that dedicated educators can have on student development, even after their formal teaching. Relationships have ended. Her legacy encompasses both direct instructional contributions and broader lessons about dedication, care, and the challenges facing individuals who work within imperfect institutional systems. The deaths that result from social problems or institutional failures often create the most lasting community changes by serving as catalysts for policy reform, cultural awareness, and collective action that might not have emerged without concrete human examples of abstract social issues. These socially significant deaths frequently transform deceased individuals into symbols that represent broader causes, while also honoring their specific human qualities and individual circumstances. The philosophical implications of lasting legacy extend beyond immediate community impact to encompass fundamental questions about the relationship between individual existence and cosmic significance, raising profound issues about whether human lives acquire meaning primarily through their immediate experiences or through their ongoing influence on subsequent events and relationships that unfold after biological death has ended. These philosophical dimensions create opportunities for exploring different approaches to understanding life's purpose and value. The memorial practices and commemorative activities that emerge following significant deaths serve multiple functions simultaneously, providing therapeutic outlets for grief, while also creating mechanisms for preserving and transmitting valuable lessons, inspirational examples, and cultural wisdom that deceased individuals embodied or represented through their lives and deaths. These memorial activities often evolve over time as community needs change and new generations encounter deceased individuals, primarily through stories and symbols rather than direct relationships. The way that different deaths are integrated into ongoing community narrative reveals collective decision-making processes about which losses deserve continued attention and commemoration versus those that are allowed to fade from active memory as community priorities shift and new challenges emerge. These memory-making decisions often reflect complex negotiations between honoring individual contributions and maintaining focus on present-moment needs and opportunities. The children's processing of legacy questions demonstrates remarkable capacity for understanding how individual lives can continue to matter long after biological death, while also revealing the challenges involved in maintaining connection with deceased community members, whose direct influence gradually diminishes as time passes and new relationships and experiences accumulate. Their legacy-related insights often involve sophisticated recognition of how departed individuals continue to shape their thinking and behavior through internalized lessons and ongoing inspiration. Stan Marsh's responses to various deaths throughout the series reveal his natural tendency to extract meaning and guidance from loss experiences, while also demonstrating how empathetic individuals can sometimes become overwhelmed by the responsibility of carrying forward deceased individuals' legacies and living up to inspirational examples that may feel impossible to match or honor adequately. Kyle Broflovsky's intellectual approach to understanding legacy often involves systematic analysis of deceased individuals' contributions and continued influence, creating comprehensive frameworks for appreciating ongoing impact, while also sometimes creating pressure to rationally categorize and explain phenomena that may transcend purely logical analysis and require emotional and intuitive understanding. The economic and practical legacies that result from various deaths reveal how individual mortality can create both opportunities and challenges for surviving community members, from inherited resources and ongoing projects to economic disruption and practical problems that require community collaboration and adaptation to resolve successfully. These material legacies often interact with emotional and spiritual aspects of remembrance in complex ways that affect long-term community development. The creative and cultural legacies that emerge from deaths throughout the series demonstrate how mortality can inspire artistic expression, cultural innovation, and collective meaning-making activities that transform individual loss into community resources for ongoing inspiration, education, and healing. These creative legacies often provide accessible ways for community members to maintain connection with deceased individuals, while also creating new forms of beauty and meaning. The political and social reform legacies that result from deaths that highlight systemic problems reveal how individual mortality can catalyze broader social change when communities choose to honor deceased individuals by working to address the conditions that contributed to their deaths or the problems they fought against during their lives. These reform legacies often require sustained collective commitment that extends far beyond immediate emotional responses to loss. The spiritual and religious dimensions of legacy creation involve complex questions about consciousness, afterlife, and the possibility that deceased individuals continue to exist in forms that transcend biological death while remaining capable of ongoing influence and relationship with living community members. These spiritual legacies often provide comfort and guidance, while also raising philosophical questions about the nature of continued existence and communication across the boundary between life and death. The intergenerational transmission of legacy demonstrates how deceased individuals' influence can extend across multiple generations through stories, examples, values, and cultural practices that are passed down through families and communities long after direct memories of deceased individuals have faded. These intergenerational legacies often undergo transformation and reinterpretation as they are adapted to new circumstances and cultural contexts. The unintended consequences and unexpected developments that emerge from various death legacies reveal how deceased individuals' ongoing influence often exceeds and transcends their original intentions, creating changes and opportunities that reflect the complex interactions between individual contributions and broader social dynamics that continue to evolve after biological death has ended. The healing and reconciliation that sometimes result from processing death legacies demonstrate how mortality can create opportunities for community members to resolve conflicts, deepen relationships, and develop increased appreciation for life's value and fragility, while also inspiring greater commitment to creating positive change and meaningful contribution during their remaining time together. In the profound recognition that individual lives acquire their deepest significance, not only through immediate experiences, but also through their lasting contribution to ongoing community development and cultural evolution, we discover that examining death's legacy provides essential insights into the relationship between temporary human existence and enduring meaning, ultimately revealing that mortality serves not as the final conclusion of individual significance, but rather as the beginning of new forms of influence and inspiration that can continue to enrich communities and relationships for generations beyond any single lifespan. As our gentle journey through South Park's contemplation of mortality draws to its peaceful conclusion, we find ourselves enriched by the profound wisdom that emerges when animated storytelling dares to explore humanity's deepest questions about life, death, and the enduring significance of our brief time together in this uncertain world. Through the lens of cartoon mortality, we have discovered that death serves not merely as narrative convenience or comedic device, but as a profound teacher about resilience, community, and the mysterious forces that bind us together across the boundaries of existence itself. In the quiet recognition of animation's unique capacity to make the unbearable bearable, we understand that South Park's approach to death offers genuine comfort for our own mortality, anxieties, while inspiring continued engagement with life's possibilities, despite full awareness of its ultimate limitations. The deaths we have explored together remind us that meaning emerges not from permanence, but from the depth of our connections and the legacy of care we leave behind in the hearts and memories of those whose lives we have touched. Rest now in the knowledge that somewhere in the snowy streets of South Park, communities continue to gather in times of loss. Children continue to ask profound questions about existence, and the eternal cycle of grief and healing continues to teach us that love transcends even death's apparent finality. Sleep peacefully, knowing that our shared humanity finds its greatest expression in how we care for one another during life's most challenging moments.